When you get triggered by your child's behavior, there is a reason. When we respond internally to our children, it may be a deeper reason and not actually the child's behavior. Where is the barrier to being one's best self? Well, you can develop that inner sense that allows you to see your child separately, that is, your child's behavior separately from your heightened response internally. How do you know which tools to use? Today's guest, Gayle Weill, will share her expertise and show you how to divide that. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned. Because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Welcome back. Before we begin, I would like to read a review because I haven't read a review in a long time. And now if you haven't gone over to Apple Podcasts and scroll down to that little teeny statement that says leave a review, please do that. Your reviews and stars really help my show grow, which means that people that want this type of information are more easily able to find it. So your reviews go a long way to help other people as well as they help me. So thank you. So here is a review from Big Fan who leaves 5 stars. And he or she writes, "Incredible podcast. This podcast has a lot of incredible content and is very helpful. It gives a lot of peace of mind and actionable tips. She does a great job at being professional, concise, and engaging. Can't wait to hear more." Thank you, Big Fan, for your 5-star review. And any of you listeners, I invite you to also leave reviews. All right, today's guest is Gayle Weill. She is a licensed psychotherapist, and she is graduated from Yeshiva's University in the MSW program. Ms. Weill went on to receive additional certifications and training in child-parent psychotherapy, EMDR, and hypnosis. She is also nationally accredited as an adoption competent therapist and is a Circle of Security Parenting facilitator, which is a program that promotes the attachment and bonding between parents and their young children. Now let's listen to the interview with Gayle Weill. Thank you, Gayle, for being here today with me. I'm so glad to talk with you on the language of play. I appreciate your expertise as a psychotherapist, and I know that the parents in the audience are going to benefit tremendously from your wisdom. Tell me why it is that you got into psychotherapy.
I love being able to help people in the sense of hearing them. There are all types of way to help people. Actually, it's funny. I initially started off as a nursing major in school, but I realized I'm not very medically savvy, but I am very good at talking and listening and helping people brainstorm ways in which to help themselves. I enjoy it. I enjoy speaking with people and being able to empower people to be their best selves.
I love that. Those of us that are growing people are always trying to evolve our best self out of ourself. How do you think of parenting when you are trying to help parents evolve their best selves?
Yeah, there are a couple of themes that come up with parenting. There could be extreme aggravation with managing difficult behaviors, or it could be a lot of self guilt, because they love their children so much, but they feel that maybe they didn't handle specific situations in the way they wish they did, or they have, some of their own stuff coming up in their parenting, meaning like they're really worried about a particular behavior, or maybe their child is not asserting their needs. And it's reminding them of things that came up from their own childhood, and it's
Mhm.
triggering. And then they become anxious, and sometimes needlessly. Like it could be that the situation with their child is completely fine and there isn't really anything to worry about, but because of the parent's own stuff, they find themselves having a lot of anxiety. So those are a few issues that tend to come up when I'm working with parents.
Right. I think when I hear that, I think kind of in two directions. One of those being what you said, needlessly anxious. And when I think of the parents that listen, we are seeking help for our kiddos because we are anxious and we want things to be better for our kids. But you're right, sometimes it's needlessly. And sometimes it's really authentic because there's some kind of delay or disorder or disability, something going on. And we maybe have a diagnosis and maybe we don't. We don't know what it is, but we know something is happening. So,
Yeah.
which do you see more often?
All three, to be honest with you. I find it's an incredible theme where there's always this immeasurable guilt,
Mm.
and always this wanting to have a good connection with one's child and make sure that their emotional needs are being met. And then people are always, I think feeling triggered in some way with how to parent. And I never want to minimize someone's anxiety. So when I say needless anxiety, I just mean that sometimes one may feel anxious about a situation that is completely developmentally appropriate.
All right. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Hmm.
Yeah. It's not to say that, the parent is, just anxious and should just stop the anxiety. It's legitimate. But sometimes a situation is actually normal without them knowing. And I do like to help parents brainstorm and come to those realizations.
How do you do that?
When we talk about the situation, I'm trying to think of a really good example that might help illustrate this a little bit better. Let's use a very common example. Let's say that this parent took their child to the park. The child is having a really great time, but it's time to go home and eat dinner, and the child doesn't want to leave. The parent is becoming very frustrated because they're saying, "Come on, it's time to go," and the child is saying, "No, I don't want to go," or they're just ignoring the parent. And the parent might then, their blood might be boiling a little bit. They might be thinking to themselves, well, my child is so spoiled. I don't know why, like, she's not listening to me. I don't know why he thinks he can just manipulate, and whatever the thoughts come up, or even, why can't I be a parent that has a child that listens? What am I doing wrong? Whatever the thoughts that come up, what is important to keep in mind is that it is a very normal thing. These transitions, like leaving the park when somebody is having so much fun, that's a hard thing, and it's a normal thing to not be so good at managing that transition. So where am I going in this long ramble? What I'm trying to illustrate is that rather than, those thoughts get ahead of us as parents and assume we're doing something wrong, or assuming that we have a disobedient child, recognize that some of these things are actually normal, developmentally appropriate behaviors. And with that in mind, we can then do something about it to address it in a healthy way. So that can be, in this case, setting a timer, being able to empathize with the child that, yes, it is very difficult to leave. We were having fun. With having in mind that this is a healthy behavior, we can then approach it differently.
I like that. That's really important to keep it in mind that it is a normal, healthy behavior. And you said something that I really want to highlight, and that is that when we as parents, we have thoughts come into our mind that direct the way we view our kids, the label, they're manipulating, they're naughty, they're disobedient, they're not listening. whatever the label we have for them is how we're going to react to them. And I like that you said that in your story. Maybe, so I'm just highlighting what you already said. And then you also gave the example then of, if we think of it as normal developmental behavior, we start to remember with empathy, oh, it is hard to leave what we want to do. And you said that you can set a timer, something to help the child make the transition. So these are really, really good things to remind us all, because those triggers that you talked about are those thoughts that we have, aren't they? That make us run down the path of thinking the negative thought, because we're not triggered if our thought is empathy.
Yeah.
So I like those two strategies. And when you help parents to be the best selves that they can be, what kinds of things do you teach parents?
Yeah. Well, the important thing to do in a session is just to, find out what are the presenting issues. What is bringing somebody to therapy? And I'd like to help develop those tools to answer your question, in the sense that we want to be able to figure out first and foremost what's going on. Where is the barrier to being one's best self? And then based off that, we can come up with the necessary tools. So let's say the barrier is my child's not listening to me. Okay, well, what is the circumstance that's going on where they're not listening? When are there times when your child is listening? If we can differentiate between those times, then we kind of have a better sense of which tools to develop.
Of course.
And that could be communication. That could be one tool. Or empathy, like I said earlier. It really just depends on what is going on in any particular parent-child situation.
All right. Thank you. So when you have people in therapy and in your psychotherapy practice, what are the typical ages of children that you see?
Yeah.
Or
I'm typically meeting with the parents, and it's usually parents of children between the ages of 2 and, I would say, 5, typically speaking.
so parents of young children, and these young children are having some big outbursts.
Yeah, they're having some big feelings for sure.
All right. And then would you say that the barrier is within the parent?
I would say the majority of the time that is the case. Now, that's not to blame parents for what's going on. I don't blame. We are all doing the very best we can with whatever is being presented to us. We only know what we know. So there's no blame here. But I would say that it is the parent's responsibility to help the child learn how to emotionally regulate.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that the parent has to first discover what that trigger is. And most of the time, if they're coming to therapy, they realize they're triggered. So there's step one. Then you help them figure out what is causing that trigger. And is that what we're calling the barrier? What is
Right.
causing the
That's
trigger?
exactly it. That's
Okay.
exactly it. Yeah.
Okay. And so then you help them figure out what their barrier is. And you gave a good description of how you walk a parent through the thinking process to open up what is actually going on. And I assume, tell me if I'm right, that you probably do some digging into history, digging into childhood or something with the parent to figure out where did some of those barriers come from.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I can give another example in that regard. Maybe, a parent has a 2-year-old child who is crying when they wake up in the morning. Ideally, we'd love it for our kids to always wake up happy and well rested, but that's not always the case. One parent may feel that this is a normal thing. I'm going to go in there, and we're going to go about our day. I'll provide comfort. I'll find out maybe what's wrong. Maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe it's just how he woke up. Whatever. Another parent, though, maybe would respond internally very differently, in the sense that maybe when they were young they were left in their crib a little bit too long, and they remember that feeling of being very bored and really wanting to start their day and play, but mom or dad didn't come to get them right away, and so they were really sad about being in their crib. And this is subconscious. They may not understand why they're immediately rushing into that bedroom to get the kid and comfort and say, it's okay, you're going to be okay, and have a little bit more heightened of a response than that other parent I mentioned, who is more understanding about the fact that this is developmentally, this happens
Mhm.
sometimes, you know? I mean, when I say triggers and how a parent may respond differently based on their own childhood stuff that they don't even realize.
That is a fantastic example. And what I'm hearing is that a parent who, as a child, was left too long, experienced sadness or some kind of emotional situation, trauma, mild trauma, whatever it is. Maybe it's a big trauma, I don't know. But they have a situation in their childhood, and unbeknownst to them, they have issues with it inside of them. So they don't know about it. But when something mirrors that situation, such as their own child in the crib, that little child inside of that parent is having a full blown reaction and rushing over to not allow their child to experience what they had experienced as a child. Is that what you?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you
That
got
is a
it.
fantastic explanation.
Thank you. Yeah. I think, once we come to that realization, I really like to help parents develop that inner sense where they can judge, not based on some traumas or maybe trauma with a little t, as I like to say. Maybe it's not a significant trauma, but it's something that they experienced that really didn't sit well with them, and they're bringing it into present day with their own kids. I really like to then help parents to be able to recognize when they have that heightened response and to be able to pause and ask themselves, is this something that's coming from my own stuff? Or is this a true emergency? To be able to ask yourself that question could then bring that anxiety down and then make it so that the parent can then respond, maybe in a more healthy way, a more calm way.
It sounds like you're helping both the parent with their own childhood traumas, as well as helping the current child have a better mommy and daddy. So the difference you're making in the world is very good and very important. And I'm so glad you're doing it, Gail.
Thank you. I so appreciate this opportunity to be able to talk about what I do.
I bet. Yeah, this is fantastic. Now, as we get closer to the end of the interview, what would you like to leave our audience with? Sometimes guests give an illustration, an example.
Sure.
If you could say something that would be like, here's a nugget, a tool that you can use today, something that parents can take and apply, small enough that they can remember when they get out of the car from listening to this while they're driving, and they can remember when they get in the house. So something that is a nugget of doable. What would you leave with our parents?
Yeah, I would just remind, the parents that please know that sometimes as human beings, we make mistakes, and you love your children so much. You don't want to make mistakes, but it's going to happen. Please feel empowered to know that if you say something you didn't mean or you wish something went a certain way and it didn't, that it's actually quite a good opportunity for your child to learn the wonderful thing about repair and apology, because this is going to be something that comes up in their day to day. They're going to make mistakes too, and you don't want your child to think that they can't come out of that mistake. Apologize, and it will be okay. You don't have to beat yourself up.
Can you give us an example of a good apology? Let's say that child's 5 years old and you yelled at them when they spilled their milk. Can you give us an example of a good apology for a 5-year-old?
Yeah, during a calm moment, I would sit down with the 5-year-old and I would talk with them about what happened. It could be that the 5-year-old kind of just moved on and isn't dwelling on it in the same way that you are. But because you feel really badly that you handled it that way, you could simply bring it up and you could say, hey, you remember what happened earlier when you spilled your milk? Mommy kind of had a big reaction about the spilled milk. Sometimes we spill our milk or we make a mistake, and that is going to happen, and it's okay. And I am so sorry that I yelled at you. I really wish instead I said, uh-oh, we got to clean that up. Let's make sure we're more careful next time. It happens, no big deal. I really wish that mommy responded like that. And I'm so sorry. And then pause and let the 5-year-old have his or her say. It could be they don't really have much to say. It could be that they want to give a hug or they just want to go back to playing, whatever. The important thing is that, you felt like you had that opportunity to repair. And as they get older, they're going to incorporate that in their own situations, even if it feels like they didn't in that moment.
Right. They learn how to apologize by getting apologized to.
Exactly.
So we do need to apologize to our kids if we expect them to apologize to anybody.
Yeah. And don't think that a 5-year-old, just because they're ready to go back and play or they kind of brushed it off, don't think it didn't make an impact. It's incredible. The art of apologizing. It's a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
I love that. So thank you so much for explaining something that is a meat and potatoes idea for moms and dads. And I know that the listeners are going to be very impacted by your explanation.
Oh, I
Thank
hope
you.
so. Absolutely.
All of a sudden,
Thank you.
blank in my thoughts here. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you again. Do you have any final thought for the listeners?
Final thoughts are, I think the biggest takeaway I can give is please take it day by day. Parenting is hard. And if you're finding yourself frustrated, it's okay. Take that pause, take a breath. You love your kids and you know that to be true. You got this. That's my takeaway.
I love it. All right. And I will leave contact information in the show notes so that if our listeners have something that they would like to communicate with you about, they can. And I believe you have a link for the show notes as well. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you tell us about that link?
The link to my website, you mean to say?
Whatever you have.
Yeah, you can find me at my first name, last name, Gayle Weill, LCSW, as in licensed clinical social worker.com.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.